Olá, pessoal, sejam todos bem-vindos a mais um episódio do meu podcast. E hoje eu estou com uma pessoa super especial, o Gavin Crump. Ele é arquiteto, ele é fundador e consultor BIM na BIM Guru. E ele é criador de um dos maiores canais de YouTube de Dynamo, Revit e processos BIM, que é o Aussie BIM Guru, que em Brasil a gente poderia traduzir como o guru do BIM australiano. Ou guru australiano do BIM, algo assim, tá? So, hello Gavin, how are you?
Hi, I'm really well. I must say that guru sounds much better with your accent. I like the guru.
Really?
Sounds good. But
That's
I
good.
recognize the word guru and dynamo there.
Yeah, yeah.
But no,
Well,
I'm very well, and I'd like to thank you for having me on your podcast. And
it's a,
can't
it's a
wait to sort
pleasure,
of
man.
talk about all things that we find passionate. Yeah.
Well, I had this idea like a month or two ago to start inviting international people to like people from the industry, like people who work with Revit, BIM in general. So you were the first name that came into my mind, and I was thinking, well, what if he doesn't accept this invitation? But I have to try. You never know, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm very glad you did. And yeah, I try to accept as many of these sorts of things as possible because I guess the more information I can get out there, the better my goal of what I do with my business and my hobby with BIM is. Because that's really my goal, just to share as much as I can with people so that we can make the industry improve faster. And everyone can catch up to, where some of the countries are. Because I know Australia is probably I wouldn't say they're a leader in BIM, but they're doing quite well. So I think it's only fair that we sort of share that knowledge with more people that are in developing countries that are still coming up to date. Yeah, but I'm very flattered that you thought of me, and yeah, very excited.
Yeah, and like I told you before we start recording, like your work, your tutorials, they help a lot. And I think your biggest difference is that because you create like Dynamo scripts and for things that we really use in our day-to-day. Like it's not really only theory or studies, it's really practical. So I think that's the big difference, and that's why everybody loves your tutorials, man.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I sort of try to make content that I guess I wish I had when I was learning. That's sort of how I approach it. So I think of all the things I've learned over time and how I can package them together into something that would have saved me like a month or two and put it into a 30-minute video. And I've seen a lot of people really accelerate their BIM understanding and their skill sets using, say, Dynamo or Revit through my content. So it's been a very rewarding process. And it's been interesting to see how I can sort of translate that into a consulting avenue, but still maintain like a free educational avenue as well in my career. I mean, it's a lot of time. I guess that's the challenge. You might have seen that my YouTube channel's on pause at the moment. So I've got taken a couple of months off there, but just to find time for work and time for fun as well. So it's been a challenge, but a really rewarding experience nonetheless. And I'm glad you like the videos too.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So before we start, I would like to ask you, you were a BIM manager before. You've worked in several architectural offices, big offices in Australia, right? So what made you decide to become a BIM consultant?
It's really been a bit of a journey to get to where I am now. A lot of people ask me similar questions like, how can I become a consultant as well? Should I follow your career pathway? And I guess mine was quite similar to a lot of other consultants out there in that most of us started with some sort of degree in architecture, engineering, some sort of base level understanding of the AEC industry, and then sort of branched out to a specialty avenue later on. I made my way into BIM management maybe in my first 5 years of my career, which is quite early. And I sort of became a BIM manager, then went to a BIM coordinator role just to really gain more experience about project coordination and construction and how projects actually come together. Because I think that was a really important part to understand of BIM itself before I really had the confidence to become a consultant. But I guess when I got near the end of my BIM management portion of my career, for now, because I might go back to BIM management one day, who knows? I sort of felt that I wasn't really reaching as many people as I could in my day-to-day work. And my efforts with the YouTube channel had really shown me that it is possible to impact people on a much larger scale. And I thought, hey, why don't I make this my job instead? Because I was finding I had a lot more passion for it as well. I'd seen things like managing my own marketing using the YouTube channel, and also that gave me the thought, well, maybe I can just manage my own business as well. I mean, it's becoming much easier to set up and operate a business with the digital age that we're living in. So now everything can go online. Like, I do all my invoicing on Xero, for example. So it saves me so much time. Whereas if I was a one-man show, maybe 20 years ago, everything would have been done by paper and sending everything in the mail. So it's not really possible, but now it's so easy. So don't get me wrong, it has been hard to set up a business. It's not an easy thing by any means. But I think that was probably my motivation overall, just to reach more people in a more meaningful way, and to sort of get all those things I'd learned throughout my career into something that I could share with the world. Because I guess if you work with a company, there's a lot of intellectual property issues, and you can't just go sharing everything that you're doing. And even in my consulting business now, I've had to pretty much do a lot of things from scratch. So when I built all my families that I sell on my website, for example, I had to build those from the start. And while some of them have concepts that I've used before in other offices, I had to repackage that material. So I spent a good 3 months rebuilding basically an entire Revit library and template. So yeah, that's sort of been my motivation, mainly just to share and improve the quality of the industry overall.
Yeah, and I feel that about the intellectual property, because when I started making Dynamo tutorials a year ago, and I did that because I saw an opportunity to reach a lot of people, because nobody really was doing Dynamo tutorials in Portuguese. Like we have good ones, but it was all old videos and nothing like current. But my one worry that I had was that, because when you are in an office, people really care about you sharing information. People really keep an eye on you, on everything that you're doing. And I think that sucks, really. So
yeah, it does hold the industry back a lot. I mean, the silo effect, I guess we call it. When I was first doing my YouTube channel, I was with a company, and I guess I did have to communicate pretty openly with the company about what I was releasing. And I think the general attitude they had, which was pretty good, and I commend them for it, was that they just said, as long as you're marketing that you work with us and this is the sort of thing you do, they didn't really have a problem with it. As well as that too, we had a very small group of people using Dynamo. So I think it was better value for them to just market what we were doing rather than try to internalize Dynamo to 1 or 2 people in the company. But I guess in your really big, 500 plus people companies, things like Dynamo and add-ins, they do become very cost-effective ways for the company to operate. So I can't understand why they don't necessarily want to share everything. But I mean, sharing like, how to put views on sheets. I mean, how important is that to a company when 500 other companies have built the exact same script? I mean, it's more those really custom workflows where I can understand why they don't want to share like the source for those. But at the same time, Dynamo is quite an interesting program, because it's essentially almost an open source program. I think it technically is open source. So it's very hard to protect and copyright and stop people from using other things. It's very much a community of people sharing. So I think that the general attitude of, I'm not going to tell you how this works, doesn't usually go down too well with the community anyway. So hopefully that sort of helps people feel a bit less protective of their content anyway. I mean, I myself, I don't feel very protective of my scripts. I'm usually quite happy to share them out. You've probably seen most of them go up on GitHub. The only ones I don't tend to share are the things that I use for like really specific business-driven purposes, like converting all the parameters in my template that I sell to clients. Like obviously that's a very, money-driven process, and it's part of why I set up my template the way I did, was so I could actually offer that service to my clients. But I guess if it's something simple, then I don't see any harm in it being shared. And And I think it's great to see like the developers managing some of the Dynamo packages being really active in the community. Like one of my favorites obviously is John Pearson. You've probably seen his work with the Rhythm package and all over Twitter sharing memes. And I think that sort of culture is something that AEC really needed. So I think it's been great for just opening up the community as well. And probably I wouldn't have made my YouTube channel if it wasn't for Dynamo either. So yeah, it's done a lot of great things for what we do.
And I feel like that's the whole idea of Dynamo, to be a community and not to have this mindset of people, well, I'm gonna create a script and I'm not gonna share the solution. Like when you are not sharing like a simple solution that you have made, like there are so many other people who are sharing way greater solutions on Dynamo forum and everything. So I think that's the whole philosophy of Dynamo.
Yeah, I think that was Ian, the father of Dynamo, Ian Keogh. I think that was his original philosophy with what Dynamo was meant to be. It was meant to be like an open source, almost like a GitHub style environment where people could collaborate. And I guess right now his current project, Hyper, is a good reflection of sort of what his original intent with Dynamo was, to open up a tool that everyone in the industry could use together. So, and Dynamo maybe didn't quite reach that point. I think like when it became a part of Revit, obviously it became much more focused on a proprietary platform. But it's good to see that I guess he's still keeping that ethos alive in what he's doing now.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
There are a lot of interesting questions in here. So let me go straight to the question, number one. So what are the key factors to successful BIM implementation?
Yeah, so it's a pretty complex one because I guess every company and person and their needs are always very different, I find. Having become a consultant, I find that, 90% of what I will do for a client is going to be driven by their initial brief to me and how that develops. I find I try not to project my opinion onto them too much. I try to rather instead take their problem and sort of mold that into a solution. So I do think that successful BIM implementation is more about strategy and planning and templating and actually setting up something that can support the goals of the client or the organization. A lot of people do sort of search for a proprietary, just give us the solution sort of solution, and it doesn't tend to work. So for example, if someone, says, oh, Autodesk should manage all the families, we shouldn't build content, it's a waste of time. I guarantee you the moment that they start doing that, you'd end up having all the technical directors in the company saying, oh, this chair doesn't look right, or this doesn't, and then suddenly you're not getting something that suits the needs of people. And whilst I think that maybe some of those things should be probably just standardized, because at the end of the day, who cares what a chair looks like? It's more about the outcome in the model that matters. At the same time, it's still, there's always going to be that need for a very bespoke and tailored solution to each person's expectations. For example, one of my major clients right now is they're a small home builder. And whilst I haven't been able to share what we do just yet, we will eventually. But we've done some really heavy templating. And just the results that they're getting, you can see just how pleased they are to have something that is what they wanted it to be. And I did actually begin from my own template, and we sort of tailored and customized it to suit their needs. But yeah, really focusing on what they briefed me on initially, I think was the key to successful implementation. Rather than saying, this is my template, you should adjust your workflows and your expectations to suit my template. Instead, we just said, oh, let's just go on a journey together and sort of find that good fit. I think as well as that, depending on the scale of your organization, maybe sometimes a standardized approach is the key to successful implementation, especially with those large, 200 plus, 500 plus companies. I think that's when you need to be on board with some industry standards like IFC mapping and COBie and some of those things that, are pretty much mandated when you get to those larger scale projects where the clients do know what they're asking for. And they say, oh, we need BIM level 3 certified, kite mark certified consultants like that. That's the point where I guess successful implementation does rely on, researching and finding out what is actually necessary in the industry, coming up to speed with ISO 19650 requirements. That's also important. But most of my clients are sort of the what we call the SME scale, so the small medium scale firm, so maybe like 50 and less. And I find at that scale you can offer a more bespoke implementation, which will please, I guess, a majority of the people in the company on average, which to me tends to be the key. If everyone's happy and everyone has to think about BIM as little as possible when they're using BIM, that seems to be the good result. How about you? What would you say the keys in your experience are?
Well, I really think when I think about BIM implementation, I really think about processes, right?
Yep.
Defining processes. So I told you before this podcast on LinkedIn that I was stopping working with Dynamo, creating Dynamo tutorials, and I was going to. I found a company for digital marketing for architects. And awesome. One thing, and I'm going through the process right now of building this company up, you know. So I'm defining processes, I'm defining the step-by-step that my clients are going to take.
Yep.
And I really find that when you define a process, so it gets so much easier because you know what to do. So when you, I really agree with you when you say like every company is different, and you first have to listen to, as a consultant, you have to listen to what their goals are, their needs, and you have to create a process or a lot of processes for them to be able to get to that goal, right? So I think, and it involves templating. Like, people need to value that more, because when you have a good template, you have processes, and everybody in your organization can do the job. They just have to follow the steps, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, it's about capturing those processes in something that they can use, I guess. It's funny though, because I guess one thing I always tell people when they're setting up a business too, is that whilst you can define all the processes, at the same time, we have to be very flexible. I think that's also very important to any sort of implementation. For example, when I first set up my business, probably what you're doing now as well, I set up a lot of template forms and a lot of PDF digital forms that clients can fill in. And I haven't used a single one yet. My clients never want to fill them out. They just say, let's have a phone call, or let's have a Zoom or a Skype. And I completely misread what I thought my clients would want to be briefed through. I thought, they'd love to have just a PDF with tick boxes. I want a Dynamo script that does this, tick, tick, tick. And I haven't used it yet. So I think the first client I sent it to, he said, just give me a call. So sometimes it's funny that we can sort of define our process, but then if we're not flexible, we sort of end up in these processes that either don't work or there's better ways of doing it. And sometimes, we can over-define a process, I find. Like, for example, my form was an over-defined process that the client just didn't have the time or effort to fill out. But I guess something like that I can take later, put on the web if my business scales to the point where I don't have time to have a phone call with every single person that comes to me. And I already pretty much am at that scale. Like, I do get people when I say, listen, I just don't have time for a call. I'm sorry, you'll have to send me an email. But maybe later on that process becomes more relevant. So I think that flexibility is probably the key to pretty much any business, even not just BIM, but even yourself. You'll find that I think that flexibility is really what will give your business success. And especially at a smaller scale, like I'm the only person in my business, so I have to be very flexible, because I guess if I lose a client, I don't have like 50 clients on hand. I have maybe currently I'm maybe like 6 or 7 at the moment that I'm working with. And, if you lose one, it's a bigger hit. So you do have to be very flexible to the needs of your client. And at the end of the day, I guess it's more a matter of, well, they're paying me, so I do have to, listen to them carefully and tailor my processes to suit them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point, because I think you need to find this balance of, you need to be flexible, because the main goal is to solve the client's problem. So you don't have to, if you complicate the whole process, so it's not good for the client. And everybody is in a hurry these days. Like, everybody wants to do everything so fast.
Everyone is definitely in a hurry. Having become a consultant, I can definitely confirm that. I get a lot of people looking for a very quick solution. And a lot of people that run away once they see the first quote, but that's okay. That's part of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Well, yeah. And what about the biggest challenge in BIM right now? What do you think is the biggest challenge?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them, but I guess the one that I probably usually touch on the most is consistency. In that, BIM is one thing essentially. It's one core concept, but there's so many different ways of doing it, and there's so many different maturity levels of BIM that places have reached around the world, and the result has become a very inconsistent landscape of BIM around the world. For example, if you look at the UK, like obviously they're far ahead of everyone else, and they've shut off and said, well, if no one else is going to come with us, we're just going to go right ahead. But then you go and look at maybe somewhere like Africa, where they're really just getting into the true concept of BIM. I mean, they're doing really well. I've been very impressed with what I'm seeing out of Africa and also South America. I've noticed really big pushes for getting BIM to work now.
Yeah.
Maybe getting away from the 2D CAD environment and really using it for coordination at least. But I think that consistency is a serious challenge. And whilst there are some efforts like the IFC schema and Kobe to try and standardize some aspects of BIM, I do find that they're also getting a little bit too far ahead of the industry on average, in that some people are only really just coming up to terms with what BIM is. And some of these people are clients that, pay our fees. So, we can't shoot ahead of them either, because we won't win the job if we confuse them. But some of these standards are becoming very complex. For example, IFC, getting a valid IFC out of Revit, for example, it's a serious challenge. And whilst it's possible, to set up that process, which I've done myself in the past, it can take weeks just to even understand how to do it before you even start doing it. So I can sympathize with businesses that are trying to just keep up with the pace of change and maintain consistency, or even establish what we should be consistent with. That's also a real challenge. Where should we all be with BIM right now is a bit hard to interpret right now, depending where you are in the world. You can just say copy the UK, but I know for a fact that in the UK, it's not always working as well. Some contractors are still using AutoCAD, or not even using CAD or BIM at all. They're just trying to hire, consultants to do all the BIM for them. Do whatever we've got to do to get a set of drawings out. That's still a very common mentality. So that consistency is probably a real challenge. It is good to see some organizations like Building Smart try to at least tell the whole world how BIM should probably be. But that's probably the biggest challenge that I combat with what I do in my day-to-day work. So that's why I try to template and standardize just a little bit, so that I can at least take the people that I work with and say, okay, let's try and at least reach a minimum level of BIM, and then see where we can go from there. But it's a serious challenge.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And everybody at different companies and countries, they are at different BIM levels, right? Mm-hmm. So it makes everything harder sometimes when we talk about collaboration. And it's a big challenge. And I would say here, a problem that I see for every Brazilian who is listening to me, I'm not going to talk anything bad about Brazil. I love Brazil, okay? So, but look, we have I think the biggest challenge right now in Brazilian companies is the mindset of people, people's mindset, because everybody, a lot of people, when they go to Revit or to any BIM software, they have they don't have the mentality of collaboration and 3D with information. They always think like Revit as an AutoCAD 2D, but now you have the 3D AutoCAD. And they don't have the mentality that you need to create an object, and you have to put information in that object, because it's what really BIM is all about. Like you have the geometry,
and then you have to share that information too. That's the hard part for most of them, isn't it?
Yes. So they don't have the mindset of organizing parameters. They don't have that mentality of creating processes, and they don't think about sharing, like you said, sharing this information. they care about what they're doing right now and F the rest. So it's something like that. So
yeah, it's sort of the old mentality of just that
yeah.
we're producing drawings and putting all the drawings into a big set. There's still that mentality, isn't there? We're no longer putting a building together. Because we have that problem in Australia too. It's definitely not like a unique problem to Brazil, don't worry.
Yeah.
We still see a lot of resistance to sharing BIM information and even just BIM models. I mean, that there's such a culture against the sharing of BIM models because you're sharing a lot of objects that have been built with a lot of time invested into them.
Yeah.
And it's intellectual property, all sorts of things, even though when we finish a project, technically the client owns the model anyway. If anyone's ever read the contracts, they'll know that that's the case. At the end of the day, that's really holding back the industry. And I think a lot of people have realized that there's not actually a lot of value in hiding all your BIM objects and just giving people a static IFC or something like that. You know, I've had projects where we share Revit models amongst the consultants and it's so smooth. We can use linked views to make sure that all our plans are looking correct between each other's sets. We can coordinate using each other's native models. I can actually look at the information inside each element. It's so much easier. And once you can get past that culture and everyone just trusts each other that little bit more, it just, you finally realize how BIM, you know, really was intended to be. In that, you're right, it wasn't a 3D CAD environment. It was really a coordination and collaboration environment. So yeah, I agree. And we see the same problems here as well. And I think also just like people not really understanding the point of the model is also relevant at the client level as well. I find that, you know, sometimes the clients aren't being briefed effectively or even by the right people. So, you know, the first meeting on a project, usually the BIM manager won't be involved. It'll just be like the managing director, maybe if it's a really big project, and then a principal or two. And maybe the BIM manager gets involved after concept design if he's lucky or she's lucky. So I find that can also be a real challenge. If the client's not briefed on BIM really early, then BIM isn't really in their mind. And because at the end of the day, they're not BIM experts. So unless they're told by someone that is what should be done, that they won't think about it. So yeah. And I think that's also, while I'm at it, that's another challenge that's sort of holding BIM back, or that's a challenge of BIM right now, is that not everyone's a BIM expert. That's probably the challenge as well. Some people are architects, some people are engineers, and they don't have time to be a BIM expert. And that's okay, but collaborating between the experts and the experts in architecture and engineering, that's a serious challenge as well, to bring that technical knowledge that they have and the coordination knowledge and sort of get people talking to coders that can build tools and, you know, streamline those workflows and make their life easier. That's really critical to making BIM work in an organization, at least. I've seen some great success in companies where, like, the most technical person in the office that has no BIM knowledge and the most computer savvy BIM app developer who have almost nothing in common get together. They can make like beautiful things happen. Like they can build tools that save everyone so much time. But if they don't come together and you know, the technical guy says, oh, BIM's a waste of time, and the BIM guy says, oh, you're just an old guy with details in your head, like it doesn't work. So that's I think like a serious challenge. It's really easy to overcome. It's just communication. Like that's usually the solution to everything in our industry, just communication, right?
yeah, I agree with you. And well, I think one thing that I see here in Brazil, I don't know if it's the same there in Australia, but like I don't know the percentage of the how many people are using BIM versus how many people are in the AutoCAD. I believe, I'm sure that most of them is in AutoCAD and 2D and are not in BIM yet.
Yep.
And because of that, when you invest in BIM, you like have a different thing to like even for your marketing strategies. So you're different. So you have a value because you have BIM. But once the BIM gets to everyone, it's not going to be a difference anymore, right? So if you're using Revit in maybe 5-10 years from now, it's just standard. It's not going to be a difference. Well, you are a very evolved company. It's not going to be like that. So I think that's why most people right now, they don't like to share things, models, because they want to get ahead in the
Yeah,
game.
they
right?
think it's their competitive edge,
Yeah,
I guess,
yeah,
even though it's probably not. Like
yeah. I
I mean,
agree.
the process is usually their competitive edge. It's sort of like giving someone a car without keys. Like they can't drive the car because they don't know how to turn
Yes.
it on. Like so, like I've seen people who've stolen my BIM families before and taken them to other companies, and it always fails. They can never use them because no one understands how they work. But if you have the people there to guide you through it and say, "Oh, this is what this parameter is meant to do," like there's the real value. As well as that, a lot of people know if something breaches their company, they can tell when it's a stolen car as well. And
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes they know that you probably shouldn't be turning that car on. But yeah, it's definitely valid. I think what you were saying before about a lot of people still not being in BIM, it probably is less the case in Australia these days. I think I've only seen one consultant that refused to use BIM in probably the last 5 years on a project with me. So that was
wow, that's impressive.
pretty lucky.
That's
And
impressive.
I'm not counting civil or landscape because they're all still mostly in 2D.
Yeah,
Because they don't really have a platform that's built for them, I feel, especially landscape. I don't think there's really a platform out there for landscape architects yet.
yeah,
So I give them an excuse. I say, okay, I agree with you. There's no easy way to do like a BIM modeled landscape surface because the surface undulation is so hard to capture in 3D. Having said that, I've seen some of them try and sort of succeed in most cases. Some use Revit. I don't think Revit's the right platform for landscape. I think it's
yeah,
possible, but it's a lot of hard work. And civil at the same time, they can use maybe something like 12D. I think that's probably the best platform I've seen used for it. But I know most of them still use civil 3D instead, which is sort of like AutoCAD, sort of a little bit like
yeah,
BIM, but
yeah.
not quite. So yeah,
They have
otherwise,
Dynamics
most
right
of
now.
the engineers and architects and structural engineers I see using pretty much all using Revit at the moment in Australia. I don't ever see engineers using ArchiCAD, so it seems like that's really their main BIM platform option right now. Whereas architects, I've seen some using ArchiCAD, some using Revit. Must say I find it a lot easier when everyone uses Revit because all the data is consistent, even though it is all proprietary. Whereas if someone's in ArchiCAD, obviously IFC becomes something you need to manage on the project quite regularly. So yeah, it's pretty rare that we see someone using a 2D program in Australia. Having said that, I know it happens out there a lot. Like I have a friend who's working on a project and they're the only people using BIM, mainly because the client didn't make it a requirement on the project to use BIM. But I think a lot of clients now know that they should at least ask for BIM. They probably don't know why they're asking for it a lot of the time, but they just know that all of the other clients out there are doing it and they're getting good results, better project coordination, better outcomes on site. So they do save money in the long run for
Yeah,
requesting it. And most companies are using BIM in Australia to some degree. So I think if they don't have the capability to use BIM, they just don't survive in the market these days. I do know companies that have closed just because they stayed in 2D and refused to get out of 2D. And I think a lot of companies are going to still close, especially during COVID.
yeah,
If people didn't have competitive edge before COVID, like they're pretty screwed now, in my opinion,
yeah, yeah.
because you know that the market's shrinking. Clients have less money to spend, and you know some people are going to get caught out in a pretty tough time. But I guess that's just the nature of business, right? I mean, you know, the big businesses get bigger, and the small businesses, you know, some of them survive, some of them don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's gonna happen here in Brazil
Mm.
in like maybe 2 or 3 years. Like
Mm.
everyone who's going to refuse to get into BIM and this
Mm.
type of technology, they're going to lose space in the market
Mm.
because
One thing
people
you'll
are.
find too that we found in Australia, and I know people in Dubai and Qatar and other cities that have developed very quickly have found, and I know that Brazil is also developing very quickly now, especially in the major cities, that the international firms will put a lot of pressure on the local market as well.
Yeah,
Even in Australia, we have a lot of UK-based architects that come and do projects here, and the clients see what they get and they go, "Oh wow, like why didn't we get this before?" And the next time they do a project and you know, the old local firm comes back and says, "Hey, we're just going to do what we did 2 projects ago." They're just going to go, "No, we've seen better and we want this from you." And they'll say, "Oh, sorry, we don't do that." And they're not going to go to the local company. They're going to go to the international one again. So I
yes,
think that's where a lot of pressure will come from. I know in Qatar, especially, that's been a great city to show how much a landscape can change in BIM over a very short amount of time. Like I know I was in a webinar last night, and one of the guys was from Qatar, and he showed a picture of the city center, and he said, I think 10 of the skyscrapers there from the last 10 years were done by international architects that were all well known for using BIM. So it just goes to show that, you know, if you don't pay attention for too long, you'll get taken over by people that can access your market as well. And I think it's a good thing. I think that's inevitably the best way to force change is to look to the people that have, you know, maybe got a little bit ahead and can sort of force the market to catch up or get out, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But it's just what happens.
Yeah, we already have big international architecture offices here in São Paulo. But yeah, it's going to happen a lot more in the next years because I think that's the game, right? If you don't do it, there's going to be someone who's gonna do it for you. So
it comes down to the clients too. Like as you know, some of the less technically experienced and exposed directors of some of these client-based large companies that bring most of the projects in retire, and some of the younger people move their way up the ranks that know better. When it comes to technical aspects, they're going to really change the landscape of what is required as well, because they will know better and they will know what to ask for. Whilst they probably don't have the same sort of business management strategies as some of the senior people that can manage companies in a very difficult environment, I think that will be a key as well. Once our clients are asking for these things, which will happen and already is happening in some cases, you know, that's going to force change as well. There'll be a lot of, I think, like sort of Tesla style disruptions to how our clients operate, where one company will suddenly just do a completely different business model and everyone's going to be forced to follow them. For example, even Tesla, I know they're investing in BIM now. So like those sort of companies will start leading the way. And, you know, if you don't do what they do, then chances are they might just buy you out and sort of absorb you anyway. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes. But I guess the pressure is that you can no longer sort of just wait for everything to let you catch up. It's more if you're not keeping up, then you're taking a risk, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. And well, Gavin, you are a BIM consultant right now, and you work a lot with BIM implementation and templating, right?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably about 75% of my consulting to date has been around either templating, training, or content development, typically focused around Revit. Just a lot of it actually coming from my base template and sort of changing it to suit clients' needs. That was probably one of the best business decisions I made to release my content. And whilst I charge a little bit of money for it, it's like it's so much cheaper than everything else out there. So that was a really good decision. That's probably generated a majority of my leads for consulting so far.
That's good. And what about, I have a question here for you. The next question is about templating. So is it better to develop your template internally or to hire a specialized consulting company to do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one I have to think about all the time, you know, because I guess that's my business pitch. Like, why me? Why not just do it internally? And I guess it really, again, it depends on the business scale and also the maturity. So how far along is the business already? You know, do they already have a really developed system and they're just looking for a few extra things to add to it? And I find the less developed the business, the more value a consultant can bring, because they can accelerate your growth to catch up with the competition. Because a lot of the time you'd have to do a lot of research to understand even just how to set up all the systems that support a BIM platform. So if you can sort of skip a few steps using a consultant's aid, you will save time and you will save money. But I guess if you've already got a very developed system in-house, a consultant isn't always the best investment, because sometimes you just need people to maintain that system regularly. So I think those two approaches are the most common ones I see. You either outsource because you're behind, or because, you know, you have no one in-house that can support the system, or, you know, you build a team internally that can foster and build a culture of BIM. I mean, even with my clients that I try to sort of catch up to the industry, like I always encourage them to find people inside their organization that can become a regular promoter of BIM. So I'll usually sort of identify someone that I interact with and say, hey, how about that person? Why don't you try making them like your BIM manager internally? Because sometimes companies just don't have one, which, you know, sounds crazy, but it happens a lot. You know, they might have a technical director who never touches a mouse, which, you know, is, you know, far from a BIM manager. Or they might have an old CAD manager that, you know, hates Revit, and it's like, that's not going to work. so I think that's sort of the reason why I would engage a consultant to sort of help you catch up, or really just get something very special that, you know, someone might not necessarily know how to do, that isn't specialized in the field. I think consultants are great for like little sort of quick projects too. Like, so if you have a really custom or bespoke thing that you need, and you know it's just going to be for that one project. You know, some of my projects, I call them like burst fire projects. It's like shooting from the hip. Like you'll do a project in like 2 hours, and it's all done on the same day that you get the brief, and that's it. Sometimes consultants are good for that because we can think quite quickly, and we're obviously not affected by internal business politics or internal business decisions. So where someone might be afraid to say something internally because maybe I'll get fired because I question the system, as a consultant, I can look at what they've got and say, oh, you've made a mistake. This is wrong. Like I would do it like this, and they can't fire me. I mean, they can just say, oh, we're not going to work together. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, on to the next client. But at the same time, I think that makes those really quick projects where they just need someone's opinion, or they just need a quick solution. Like a consultant is very unbiased in those scenarios. And I must say, I really enjoy that aspect of consulting, that I can be very honest and open and transparent with my clients. It took a lot of getting used to. I think the first few clients I worked with, I was very careful. And then eventually I realized, hey, they're just paying me for my advice. Like I may as well be honest. I think that's also why a consultant can be really good. And obviously, remote support is something that's very relevant now, especially. It was very strange timing with COVID, given that I sort of planned on opening my business from around halfway through last year. I just thought one day, I'm going to do this. And then I opened my business, and about 2 weeks later, you know, COVID hit. So it's very weird. Whereas most consultants I meet, they opened because of COVID, not before it, because they all got let off and furloughed and said, oh, bugger it, I'm going to make my own firm. So I think that's also showed that remote support is becoming a very viable avenue for BIM support nowadays, rather than having to, you know, pay someone, you know, a lot of money. Typically, most BIM managers are quite healthily paid. And if you're not, talk to your manager. But I think that's a very viable way to manage BIM as well. And as things become more standardized, I think that will mean that BIM support doesn't need to be built into the company. If they can make BIM more standardized, well, you don't need someone to maintain the line weights and do all those basic things, because the standards are already set. And a BIM manager will be more about process, and they might be more like a project leader, for example, than a technical director. So I think that those reasons sort of mean that sometimes a consultant is a better choice.
Yeah. Well, I feel that because I've worked for a very brief period of time developing Dynamo scripts for offices, architecture offices, and awesome. It was terrible. It was a terrible experience. Let me tell you why. Because I developed a script. I developed several scripts for a specific office, and in the office, nobody knew how to open Dynamo.
They want the solution, but they haven't got the system.
And the scripts were very like they had to do a lot of things to set up the model. And they had to pay attention to the parameter values on the walls and everything. So I remember that I did like 2 to 3 hours of tutorials, and I put it on YouTube privately just for them, showing them step by step.
Half of my fee in a Dynamo project is usually training and exposure. So about almost half my fee is typically involved in that. And at first the clients are skeptical, and then when I tell them how the script's going to work, they go, "Oh, that sounds complicated." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." Like, you're going to need training. Like, and that is a serious challenge with consulting, in that sometimes you need to deliver a complex solution to solve a complex problem.
Yeah.
but the users want something basic. And sometimes it's hard to convince your client, listen, a basic solution isn't going to cut it here. You know, I can't just simplify this down to press a button. There is like some very particular things you'll need to do.
Yeah.
Some of my most successful projects with clients, I've been very involved with their training as well. And actually said, like, you know, give me access to your technical team. Give me like an hour on Zoom. Here's my fee, whatever. And I'll show them how to do it. And then they can walk away with confidence. You're not just you're not just dropping a bomb in your model and hoping that it doesn't, you know, destroy everything. And I think that's the key to, again, back to implementation. Like, you know, you do need to train and educate people on how to do something, because BIM isn't a simple thing. I mean, a lot of people out there try to promote that BIM can be really, really simple and really lean. I find that sort of thing quite frustrating, because most of these people do BIM on paper and don't actually go and get in the model and deliver BIM and see how much you actually need to make BIM work. And I do think there is a point where BIM does need to be sort of complicated to deliver, you know, solutions, because buildings are complicated things. They're not simple things.
Yes.
So as a result, our models do have to reflect that. And I think that is where Dynamo, you know, can be a challenge as a tool. You know, it is a amazing tool in the right hands. In the wrong hands, obviously, it just becomes a pain, and, you know, I don't have the right package, and all those sorts of things come into the mix. And even as a consulting avenue, I found Dynamo wasn't as big as I expected it would have been. I've done some scripts so far, but like I found that most of the demand is still on templating. And Dynamo is still sort of seen as like a tool that you just play with on the side. But I have had some clients that recognize the value, and with a really good brief between us, we delivered some scripts that were very effective for what they aims to do. But I had to convince the client, you know, you will need to be trained on how to use this. It's not going to be a simple button press. It's, if you want that, go get an add-in built for, you know, $20,000 instead of, you know, my, you know, $2,000 fee. So it's a different approach, and it relies on the users to have a bit more responsibility.
Yeah. And I really think, and what I realized during this experience is that training is essential. Like, don't give like a complicated routine, a complicated Dynamo script to a person. Even if you tell them the steps, they need to understand the packages, because a lot of things can happen, a lot of small problems, small details. So data types, packages. So it was so frustrating for me to this experience. But I learned that you need to have the solution, and you need to have a lot of training to understand Dynamo and understand how it works, right?
Yeah, a big part of sort of when I deliver Dynamo services too is I have to ask them, listen, who's going to be running the script? Like, how much experience do they have in Dynamo? Like, do they know how to troubleshoot? Do they know how to interpret warnings and errors? Because something my YouTube channel's taught me is that you do need to learn Dynamo in steps. You can't just go and build a really complex script and press run. And because if you see an error, you have no idea what to do. And most people that come to me from my channel or emailing me just say, hey, I ran your script off GitHub and it didn't work. I'm like, all right, you're gonna have to be way more specific than that. And beyond that, do you even know why it didn't work? Because if you don't, usually I just say, go back to my basic series and learn Dynamo. Because like, I'm not gonna teach you Dynamo from the ground up just to solve one warning. Like, you know, you need to be a competent Dynamo user before you even tackle these advanced scripts. So if a client doesn't have those users that understand Dynamo, it's almost a waste of time to give them a script, because you do need that culture of troubleshooting and solving problems and, you know, optimizing, changing the script. Like I always tell my clients, I've given you a script, but you should maintain it. Like if unless you want to come back to me once every 2 months and just check if the script is working, like you should find someone in the company that can maintain this object I've given you that, you know, usually costs a bit of money too. So I'm like, this is an investment you've made. So, you know, protect your investment. And I think that's the key, that you do need those people that actually understand more than just, you know, press button, run script. Yeah,
That's interesting. And since we're talking about template, well, one thing that you said that I think was very interesting is because I think when you start implementing BIM, the most solutions that you need you can solve them on templating step, right? Like
yeah, a lot of them.
you
Yeah,
need to be thinking about, well, I'm going to do a script for that. Well, you can optimize that only just with the templating if it's done well,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, a lot of people I tell, I just say master Revit, then learn Dynamo, because a lot of the things people try to do in Dynamo, you don't need Dynamo for. Like I had someone coming to me the other day saying, I need to go build like a casework library. How can I do that using Dynamo? And I said, no, that's not how to do it. I said, build the base family, then use Dynamo to pump in all your sizes. And yeah, so you've got to get like the fundamentals in Revit under your wing first. Otherwise, Dynamo is really just like sort of like an upgrade. I feel like to Revit, it's sort of just like, okay, you know how to use Revit, now use it like 10 times more efficiently. So that's how I try to see it. If you're trying to do something in Dynamo that you don't know how to do in Revit, chances are it's not going to work. As well as that too, I think like learning Dynamo, it forces you to have a good understanding of the limitations or what Revit can and can't do as well. Like a lot of people come to me with things saying, I want Dynamo to make a grid that goes like in all sorts of directions. And I'm like, can Revit do that? No. Okay, well, Dynamo can't do it either. Like you can automate the setup of something that Revit can do. Even like, ceilings, for example, you probably know that Dynamo can't create ceilings because the Revit API hasn't been exposed for ceilings yet. But the amount of people that come to me and say, oh, I've seen your floor finish tutorial, I want to do the same for ceilings. How do I do it? I'm like, just go and Google it and you'll find out in, one post that it's not possible. And it's not because, Dynamo can't do it. It's because the Revit API can't do it, so neither can Dynamo. So I think that it's so important to master or at least get really good with Revit before you can become an effective Dynamo user. Because when I build Dynamo scripts, I'm always coming in with an idea that I know Dynamo can do it and I know what it's going to do and how it's going to do it. All I'm doing is putting blocks together to make it happen, essentially.
Those are good points. And since we're talking about templating as well, so what does a successful BIM template need, in your opinion?
Yeah, good question. I mean, this is something I always had to think about too, because all my clients are different and give me different needs. But I guess it just needs enough that you can start a project from it and you don't have to think twice about all the fundamentals that really you do when a project gets started. Like the worst templates I've used are ones where you start off and there's nothing. There's no views, no sheets. You might have all the families in the entire company in the template already, which is obviously wrong. Like you don't want to have that because then you've got like a 300 megabyte template. But I think if you have enough that you could do like a quick 2-hour project in 2 hours, like, that's sort of the key of a successful template. Like for example, the template that I use with one of my clients right now to do small homes, we can turn around a home in like 2 hours using this template, like a 2-story house. And like that's very quick for a Revit model setup. That's including documentation, scheduling, everything. And the key to it is a successful template. Just like any project, if the template stinks, then the outcome's probably going to stink too. And I think like, as well as that, just having all the technical aspects captured already, like, line weights, graphics, fills, the most pointless arguments I've had in companies about templates and projects, it always relates to graphics. This wall hatch isn't right. I'm like, cool, fix the template. I don't care. That's the solution. Let's not sit around and have a meeting about it. Let's just make a decision and get it in the template, problem solved. But instead, people like to make massive committees about it, and everyone has an opinion on what the brick line weight should be, and you go, hey, there's an industry standard for this. Like, let's stop arguing about it. I think that's a really important thing for templates too. It just stops people having to question what they're using as well. And I think probably just as well as that, you sort of capture, I guess, like the baseline goals for your BIM model. So like if your goal is to have an Enscape model that can look good in 3D, don't make everything with no materials. Like put base materials and everything in the model. That way, when you've set up your base model, you can just go straight into Enscape and everything looks pretty good. That's sort of how I set up my template. One of my goals is to have a really quick setup of visualization. So a lot of my materials are set up, tailored towards Enscape. Same with my template that I release on my website. It sort of aims to set up both documentation, but also like good quality graphics without too much effort. So I think that they're sort of the things it needs to do. It needs to just achieve your needs as seamlessly and easily as possible. And it's almost like you'd need someone who doesn't know the company standards to be able to set up something very basic and not have to, go and read the technical manual for, 2 hours. It should be quite obvious how to do things in a template as well. So I think they're probably all the main things I'd recommend a template should need.
And I have to talk about that. You mentioned Enscape. I think Enscape is a great tool
I love it.
for everybody who works with Revit, and I think everybody should use it. If you're like an architecture office, you don't have to go to Lumion or V-Ray or.
It's so easy to use. I mean, I've tried Twinmotion, Lumion, some of the other ones, and I think they're all great tools. Like they all give really good outcomes. There are some features in Lumion that I really like for example, being able to swap materials when you're in the visualization environment obviously is great. But I found Enscape is just the easiest one to use and the easiest one to set up. And the base quality of what you get out of the first render is it's great. And the fact that someone can just pick it up in 5 minutes that they've mastered Enscape, I mean, that says it all. I feel like it should just be in Revit at this point. Like they should just integrate it and just Autodesk should just buy them out because like it's such a successful implementation. And it's a pretty good price too. Actually, I just finished the trial. And for some reason in my head, I thought the license was going to cost way more than it did. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh, wow, like this is nothing like compared to what I would have expected to pay for it. Because a lot of these platforms are like 5,000 plus. I think Lumion's around 5,000 if I remember right. But like I think Enscape's like 400 and something in Australian dollars. So it's very cheap, especially for like 1 year for a business. Like that's nothing compared to like the Autodesk suite, which is like $4,300 a year now or something insane like that. Just to use Revit essentially. So yeah, it's a great tool, and definitely recommend that people at the very least just try it out, because they have a 14-day trial, which is pretty easy to download and get started with. And I think it's a good way to sell the model to your client, to your technical directors. People that don't use the BIM model might sort of value the BIM model more if they see it in Enscape as well. So yeah, and the asset library is growing a lot too. There's a lot of assets coming in that I've seen lately. So it can support a lot of project types. And I'm not affiliated or anything. I'm not promoting it like directly, but like I just use it and I like it.
It's good. Yeah. And they are always improving. Like in my last company that I used to work, we bought like a license and it was great. Everybody loved it because it was easy to set up. When you had the materials all in the template, it was so easy. Everybody could do it, and it's easy to show the clients. You don't have to be worrying about, well, I need to render this or render that. I think it's the best option if you want to be productive. I think
I agree. Productive is the right word. If it's ease of use and you want to put the least amount of effort into setting up the render, it's perfect. Like the first time I think I showed a client Enscape, I remember he saw the Revit model and he was just like, ugh. Like he looked at it and he's like, oh, that BIM models are ugly. And I was like, just wait. I was putting up Enscape kind of, he had no idea what he saw, and he just saw it. He sort of did this like just sort of stood back in his seat like, whoa. I was like, yeah. And he thought it was just a render. And then I turned and pivoted and he was just like, this is like, you can move around. I'm like, welcome to the future. Like we're here. So it's great. I mean, anything like Enscape, I just love those real-time rendering environments. It feels like I'm playing a video game, and like I'm an avid gamer. So like to be able to unite gaming and BIM, like it's really fun for me. Like, I mean, I remember when I first BIM managed, one of my jobs was just to take clients through the models that we did and just talk them through their design. I just loved seeing their reaction, and even just giving them the mouse and saying, hey, you walk around, you want to see your building? And, the director's going, don't do that. He's going to go in the room we didn't model. And I'm like, don't worry. So it's good. It's good fun. Yeah. And even surprising the directors sometimes as well. Like there was one time where we did a lobby fly through for the client, and we let them pilot it, and the director thought we hadn't modeled up the offices behind there, and he got really worried when he was going through the door into the offices behind there, and it was all modeled, and suddenly even the director was just like, oh, nice, haven't seen this before. And I was like, yeah, like, so even internally it can be a really fun way of using the BIM model. I
agree with you. Yeah. So I got some more questions for you before
no
we
problem,
finish. Okay.
Yeah, so I keep taking you off track, don't I? We're having too many fun things to talk about.
No, it's great, man. It's the
Yeah.
best podcast I've ever done, man.
Oh,
Because it's
thanks. Oh, well,
great.
likewise, I'm really enjoying it.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. And it's like I told you, it's really I like this feeling of well, you're just friends
Yeah.
who like to talk about
Because we are,
technology.
right? It's got to be genuine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I really like that. I really like that, and I make all my episodes like that. I don't want to use. I don't want to be formal because I'm not formal. I'm just
Yeah, yeah. Most of us in the professional world, we're not that formal, so I may as
yeah,
well be realistic, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
So my next question would be: we've talked about some of the things, but let's talk a little bit about more.
Mhm.
How does Dynamo help architects?
Yeah, so I guess I'll probably expand this beyond just architects and just say how does it help the, architects, engineers, etc.
Yeah,
Because it helps us all in very similar ways. I guess like one thing I really like about Dynamo is it lets us capture process in some sort of form that's like semi-automated. So you can take some really boring things that no one likes doing in the company and turn them into like fun tools that make you feel like you're actually well, you are being more productive. So like really basic things like view and sheet setup. I mean, I don't think I've set up a project with sheets and views manually for at least a year and a half now, but maybe almost 2 years now. And I remember the first time I did a 60-story tower, entirely set up all the plans in the project, named, set up, placed on sheets using one script. Like everyone around me just sort of their jaw hit the ground, and they went, "We've been wasting so much time." And I was like, "Yeah, that script probably took me about 3 hours to make." And they were like,
yeah,
"Wait, what?
that's
That's
the
it?"
feeling.
Like I was like, "Yeah, the whole project just on sheets in one day." Then they asked for sections and elevations, and I was like, manual." But yeah, like there are some things Dynamo can do well, and other things that still I find are probably better for a person to do. But I think like taking some of those really boring processes is probably my favorite thing about Dynamo because it gives me more time to do what I want, and it gives architects more time to be architects and
Yeah,
engineers more time to be engineers. Like we're no longer just the drafter that has to do everything boring, because a lot of architects and engineers get stuck in drafting and technical roles, and Dynamo does give us more time back, and as a result, people get more time to be focused on the project goals as well, rather than just the documentation. I think as well, like Dynamo gives us access to more complex geometry if we need to create things that are more mathematically driven. And I think now that construction techniques are getting more advanced, we can achieve more complex forms, whether it be through using maybe like GRC, for example, that lets us achieve more double curved elements on facades.
yeah,
And most people in Revit will know that if you need to do something double curved, it's not going to be easy. Whereas something like Dynamo, you can do very complex sweep and blend forms, and you can do lofts, which I guess Revit doesn't support typically. You can't do like a loft in stages. You can do like a
yeah,
swept blend between two profiles, but you can't loft through multiple profiles. I find most geometry I do in Dynamo relates to lofting. But I think that's also something that's really good, and it gives you a better understanding of the underlying mathematics behind the form that you generate as well. It's no longer just like the director giving a little sketch to you saying, "Hey, just make this work," and you go into the conceptual massing environment and pull your hair out for about 2 hours. It's more of a process of actually building the shape using a process that means you can return to the process later and play with the variables. And I think that's a much more positive aspect of how we can generate form now. And I think as well, it just, like I said, it changes the culture of collaboration. I think that is, one thing that can really help other architects using Dynamo, in that if they do get involved with the Dynamo community, they'll probably find that they get exposed to many different ways of working, whether it be through something like my channel or the Dynamo forums, where people actually expose and share pretty complex things they're working on. And like sometimes some of my video topics have come from Dynamo forums where I just went in a thread and I said, "Oh, that's a genius idea. Like, we should be sharing this." So I'm like, I'm going to go make my own version of the workflow and then make a video about it.
yeah, yeah.
And to me, I'm not really stealing. To me, it's more I'm just sharing something that deserves to be exposed. I think I always credit whenever I do something like that. There's only a few times I've done it. But I think that that's also like something that architects have to get out of Dynamo as well, that you can just learn more things about how to deliver. Yeah. How about yourself? I guess you've used quite a bit of Dynamo, so you've probably got your own sort of take as well.
Yeah. Well, probably the same as you told us. Like, especially, well, when I always tell this to the people who well follow my work, see my videos. I think the main advantage that you get from Dynamo initially is to automate repetitive tasks.
Yep.
So it's the main thing. And then you can get to generative design, you can get to complex shapes. But first, if you use Dynamo to automate boring tasks, so it's a great advantage, right? So those tasks like renaming views, renumbering. I remember that I showed a client a very simple script to renumber sheets in Revit, and he was impressed, and it was a very simple, really very simple, that in 10 minutes you do it on Dynamo. And he was very impressed because he was doing that manually. Yeah. And he was like impressed. Well, can you give me this script? How much is it? And I told him, well, I have a YouTube tutorial on that. It's 15 minutes and you can watch it, and I can give you the file, so it's no problem. So yeah, I think initially you really get a lot out of Dynamo by automating these repetitive tasks. So yeah,
it's funny too, actually. A few times I've built like a script that's quite simple, and I've shown a director who I'm working with at the time, and they say, wait, how do we do it currently? And I was like, they're doing it manually. And they're like, they're just shocked. Like, they don't even realize how inefficient some of the processes that are used out there are. And once they see something like Dynamo, it's like, money. Let's just save money. Just save time, save money. And it's just like, if they don't know, then they don't get involved. But if they see suddenly, oh, we're actually doing it in a way that's 10 times slower, like all they hear is that we're spending 10 times more money than we need to. So I think if you can get those simple case scripts, like you said, that seems to be the key. Whereas if you show them something crazy like a generative design workflow, they just go, space age stuff over there, whatever. I'll just ignore that and let the experts do their thing, because they can't put a dollar value to it because they don't know the alternative method really. Even though the alternative method is probably like the entire design process, which is obviously expensive. Generative design is an interesting one, actually. I might get your take on that too, because I find that I'm getting a lot of requests to do like videos on generative design, and I'm still trying to get my head around how it's going to be successfully implemented in the industry.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going a bit off script here.
No, it's
but
a great topic.
I thought it might be just worth briefly touching on it, because I'm always curious to see what other people think about the workflow. Like I feel like it's not necessarily going to be sort of successful right now, like from what I've seen, in that a lot of people don't understand how to set up the workflows or how complex the workflows are to set up.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Like I've tried setting up a few myself, and like once you get beyond a certain point, once you've reached your 7th level of if statements, it's like, wow, this is getting pretty chaotic. Like I look at something like test fit and I just go, I'm in awe of what they must be doing behind the scenes to make that thing work. And every time a new variable gets introduced, it's like, how many more if statements must that be? But do you see like any use cases currently where you are? Because we don't really see many in Australia.
Let me give you my true opinion on that.
Yeah,
I think generative design is a marketing tool, first of all, that Autodesk is using. It's great. Don't get me wrong. It's great. Yeah. It's a very good thing. And I think it's going to get bigger, and we are going to see a lot of great solutions, but it's not simple. It's so hard. It's so complicated, because you have to analyze everything that an architect, should analyze. So it's a lot of variables that you have to consider. And it's hard. It's really hard. So there are people who want to learn Dynamo because of generative design, and they come to talk to me and they say, well, Paulo, how can I put my the tables and the chairs like in the restaurants, and how can I create a routine that I can press a button and it can project for me, it can create a project.
Yeah, the automatic project button, that's the most popular request I get. How can I generate an entire office using generative design? And I'm like, not right now, you can't, like, unless you want to go and make an entire company dedicated to it, like TestFit. Wouldn't bother.
And I always asking, well, are you renaming views with Dynamo? Are you creating like families along a path using Dynamo? Well, Paulo, no. So you're not even doing the basics. You're not even automating the boring tasks.
Yeah, well, they're not even defining one study, let alone multiple studies. Yeah.
So, and you're not even you only want to think about the generative design because that's what Autodesk is trying to sell, I think, and they're right. I mean, they're a business. They have to market. Tool, and it's a great tool. Like if you're able to create a script that really does the job, it's great. But it's so hard, man. I mean, you just have to put a lot of time and effort on creating like one solution, and you don't have time for that. Like
exactly. And I think the challenge too is the generative design's been around for a long time too. That's like something that makes me wonder how quickly it's going to take off, because we've had things like Galapagos and Grasshopper for more than 10 years now. And you know, obviously that's still not like a mainstream way of working. So I do wonder if like it's going to be the same story. And even if I go to the video that I did for Rhino versus Revit, I'm pretty sure the views on the Revit one were like 3 times more than the Rhino one. So it just goes to show that I guess people as well, they're not always aware of I guess what's out there. Like I'll just check the current view count. I think it's about 3 times in difference. I got 1,000 on that one, and then I didn't realize I had that many views. And then, like 3,500 on the Revit one. And I released them at the same time. So it was interesting to see sort of the interest level that came out of both. And it seems like it's more tied to the fact that people are already using Revit or Dynamo rather than the fact that they want to use generative design as well. Yeah, I mean, I really hope that it does get utilized effectively, but it does seem like most of the generative design I see at the moment is just COVID chair spacing. Which is quite easy to do if you know how to do it. I mean, you don't even need generative design, really. You just need to do a grid of points and put a desk at each point and fit it in a surface. Done.
Yeah. And there's another thing that I like to mention about that is that in order for you to be able to create a logic for a generative design solution on Dynamo, you really need to understand Dynamo. Like you really need to be hardcore on Dynamo.
Yeah, it needs to be the tool to get to the solution, not the solution itself.
And people think it's easy. The idea that's people are buying is that it's easy. We need to study that because it's easy, it's simple, and there is nothing simple about that, man.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when people ask me about like space layouts, I say, okay, how long does it take your office to generate a standard space layout, just one, without generative? And they're like, oh, it takes weeks. And I'm like, there you go. It's going to take at least that long to define your study as well. That's good. I like to hear what other people think about it. And I think that's usually the general consensus that I hear around the world as well right now. But everyone, I think, is hopeful that like there'll be a good use case for it. Like one use case I see that I like is when people use it for environmental testing, and they try to optimize based on all the conditions of the year. I see that as a very feasible use case. I mean, there's a lot of like roof and facade optimization based on, you know, finding a fixed shade's best position based on the suns throughout the year. And those are the cases that I think are really easy to sell to the clients as well, because you go, well, now we've saved your heating bills. So it's just money saved straight away. Interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's a good example. Like when you use generative design for facades, right? Panels and everything. I think that's a very good one. And layouts. I mean, layouts. We are talking about layouts, but I think it's a very good example to create a generative design to like place restaurant tables and optimize the solution. But it's hard. It's very complicated because there are just so many things that we need to consider.
I mean, it's easy to make a randomization study, but it's hard to make a study that actually thinks about it more carefully.
Yes. And I think that's going to be big right now. That's going to be easier if you want to make a generative design solution. Then facades, solar studies are going to be the easiest to do initially. But I think we're going to evolve. I think we're going to get there. To really have scripts that are going to think about this to think about the solutions for us, but we still have a long way to go. That's my opinion.
Worst comes to worst, we'll have test fit, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. I'll let you take.
So there is an interesting question. That's my next question for you, and I'm really excited for that. To hear your opinion on that. So do you think architects need to learn visual programming, all architects?
Yeah, I get asked this question in quite a lot of mediums, LinkedIn, Gmail, all over the place, but it's always phrased in slightly different ways. It's usually more commonly, do I need to learn visual programming, is how people phrase it to me. And usually my response is, tell me more about yourself. Like, I don't know enough about you to know if you need it, because it's really driven by context. I would say not all architects need to learn visual programming. In fact, not that many of them do need to learn it, but a lot of them need to understand it. They need to understand what visual programming does, how it works at the fundamental level, the limitations of visual programming as well. So not expecting something to be too fast, for example, like compared to an app or an add-in. I think that's the side of visual programming that needs to be mainstreamed. So that not only, can the coders understand how visual coding works, but the key stakeholders that are controlling the spend of companies and the research and development budgets can invest with confidence in what visual coding could do for them. I think that's the key. So it's all context. I think no one should ever learn visual coding just for the sake of learning visual coding, because they won't have a reason to use it, and they'll probably it'll be like a little Udemy course that they do and they never look back at it. And that is usually how I find most people are treating visual coding. They're treating it more like a little exercise rather than, hey, this can actually improve what I do. Because that is the hard part about visual coding, finding that moment where you realize what visual coding can do for you. Not, what has visual coding done for the guy that's making a video that you're watching. That's the hard part. And I think that was the challenge for me as well. I actually tried learning Dynamo 4 times before I actually said, hey, I get it. Like, this makes sense now. I remember the first time I just learned about data, and then I was like, I'm bored. I don't see a use for this. I learned about strings and numbers and integers, and I was like, it's like learning maths again. I didn't want to learn maths again. And then I think the second and the third time around, I watched like tutorials, a little bit like mine, but maybe not so clear and easy to follow. And then the fourth time around, I tried to solve a pretty complex problem where I tried to automatically number every single door in a project based on the way that the door should be associating. So not necessarily the way the door is facing. So if a door is like pointing into a corridor, but it belongs to a cupboard, like it belongs to the cupboard. So I had to set up an algorithm that let rooms detect how important they were based on like how many doors they had. Were they in a corridor? Were they pointing outside? And then beyond that, I built a script that automatically numbered them all based on how many doors belong to each room and numbered them in a circle. And that taught me a lot about Dynamo. And once I hit run and it worked, like it was just like, I think I just stood up in the middle of the office and just did a little, fist pump. Everyone's like, what are you doing? And you're like, you wouldn't understand, but, I'll try and explain it anyway. And, half the people I explained it to, we just sort of like eyes glazed over, no idea what I was talking about. And then the other half were like, whoa, like, we're never going to number doors again. And I was like, yeah. You might. But yeah, I think that's like the challenge for most people, especially architects, because we are very much like driven by process. Like everything we do is very methodical. So to take that mindset and put it into a script, that's like a certain challenge that has to be overcome before I think you can really truly like use visual coding for yourself. So I think I encourage all architects to consider whether they need visual coding and whether it could save them time or make their job just more exciting and fun. I feel like without visual coding, I probably would have got very bored of Revit because everything would have been manual and all I would have been doing is populating parameter data, adding parameters, taking parameters. It's so boring.
Yeah.
So to automate that has redefined how I use Revit on a day-to-day basis. And I think that a lot of other people, if you use Revit like regularly, then you've only got things to gain by learning Dynamo. And if you don't use Revit that much, I mean, Dynamo might have some use for you as well. Like you can build batch printers using Dynamo, you can batch export DWGs, you can build them so that you don't even have to open the model. And not many add-ins can do that.
Yeah.
But Dynamo can access that. And I think people can build add-ins to do that as well. They just don't seem to focus on it for some reason. So there are some things that it can do. But I think even if you're not using visual coding, just take a little bit of time to talk to the people that are in your company. And, when you have an understanding of that, you can get great things out of people that know how to use visual coding as well. So that's sort of my take on, I guess, whether we need it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for me, at the beginning of my studies, when I saw the possibilities and I thought, well, everyone should learn that. Every architect need that. But as I learned more about Dynamo, I saw that, and now I agree with you, because not every architect needs to learn all of that, because there are different roles and jobs. And if you're like managing the project, if you're the project manager, you have other things to worry about. You're not gonna. Some project managers, they don't even go to model anything on Revit. They just manage the tasks, people tasks, and everything. So so I think we need to understand the context and the needs. And then
and what we need at the end of the day, I guess, is the key, right?
Yeah.
Sort of reminds me when I worked at Woods Bagot, there was a man on one of my projects, and he was probably in his 60s, and he was like a dictionary of architectural details. And it just reminded me that I don't need to know all these things. As long as someone else around me knows it and I can communicate with them effectively, that's good enough. And it sort of taught me that, focus on what you want to specialize in and master communicating with the people that know things you don't. That seems to be the best strategy in AEC these days. Like there's some details on projects I would have no idea how they work. Like, I've never done a building with a terracotta facade, for example. So I have a very basic understanding of it, but to draw like a detail, no idea. And if I ever had to do it, I wouldn't go to technical websites. I'd go to the first person I know that did a terracotta facade and say, hey, how'd you do it? Have you got any examples? And, it saves so much time, and it saves us so much mental stress of having to store all this information in our head as well. So I think, it's a good take.
Yeah. And so, that was my last question. I'm going to put all of your links in the description, okay, Gavin? So if you're listening on Spotify, go to the YouTube video on my channel, and you're going to see all of Gavin's links, okay? And for you, I just would like to give you the space right now to tell us what is next for you. Please use this space to invite everybody who is listening to anything that you're going to do. Okay, the space.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there's a lot of things going on in my career and life at the moment. I guess like some things in my career like changed when COVID came along. For example, I was hoping to go to a lot of industry events and actually in-person network with a lot of people. Obviously, my plans have changed because of that, but I guess I am still focusing quite heavily on my business and also my YouTube channel to a lesser degree at the moment. One thing I am doing right now is I am working on a course platform in the background because I did recognize that my YouTube content, whilst it's good to have, it's not as engaging as I think a course structure would make it, where you can actually go to little parts of a series and return to them, and I can give you exercise files with them as well, and give it more context. So I am developing that on a platform right now called Thinkific. There is a mailing list open if anyone wants to go check it out at courses.bimguru.education. I'm planning to probably release the first course soon, probably I'm hoping like within about a month and a half. I keep pushing the date over and over again because like things keep coming up. And unfortunately, I guess the course platform hasn't been my number one priority. But I am slowly sort of reducing the amount of consulting I'm doing, with the hope that that will give me like time to really focus on it. Just reducing to a couple of key clients. Having said that, don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you are looking for consulting. So I still do work if it comes to me. But yeah, I'll aim to cover probably firstly like a Dynamo master course. So going from like the very basics to maybe just getting into Revit API. So taking people through like the full journey of Dynamo. And also I do have like a series on my YouTube channel. I recorded that a long time ago when my understanding of Dynamo wasn't quite as complete. And there wasn't really any good like examples I used to give context to Dynamo. So what I've actually done on the side is, if anyone's ever used Revit, you might be familiar with the sample projects that they have. I've actually taken the advanced sample project, which is like this U-shaped school. I think it's a 3-story school, and it's a pretty bad model. Like the quality is really bad, and you know the data's not there, and there's almost no drawings or documentation to teach you about industry practice. So what I'm working on right now is I've rebuilt the entire project using my template, and I'm also setting up documentation and making it a proper quality BIM model with structure, facade, architecture. Like today I'll be doing the facade details. That's like my next task. And I'm going to use this as my training model on my course platform. So my plan is that when you buy one of the courses, the first video will have here's my sample model, download it. And we're going to use this to give context to what you learn. Because I found a lot of the courses out there don't give like a model that is like a typical model you would use in real life. So I think that will sort of, right? Yeah. So I think that'll help give my courses the context that will make lessons really make sense to people, which is sometimes not what my channel does. Like some of my videos are quite abstract. It's like, here's an empty project and we're going to do something in this empty project. And, we never work in an empty project. So, so that'll probably help. I will be doing a Revit architecture course as well. I'm still deciding whether I might do like the absolute basics course on YouTube, but I might put it for free on the course. So I do think there needs to be like a free fundamentals course out there. There's some on LinkedIn Learning, but they teach in a different way to what I plan to teach. And then I was probably going to do a paid course where we build like a residential project from the start with a focus on templating, to teach people about that. And then also a course on model management and Dynamo for BIM model management as well. So that's sort of like a pretty big plan. And I think I can hopefully grow this platform into quite a big community as well, by sort of taking what I've done on YouTube and encouraging people to also be a part of this community. And some of the courses will be free because I know that not everyone around the world can afford courses. Just to give people an idea of price, if they're wondering, it's going to be anywhere between probably $75 to $150 a course. I'm just deciding on, length of course versus quality you get out of it. And also the fact you get a massive sample project that comes with it too. So still trying to figure that out. I know most courses cost like $300 to $500, which is too much. And I know I'm competing with Udemy and LinkedIn Learning, which are obviously like $30 to $40, which is a lot cheaper. So we'll see what happens. But so that's one of my plans. For people that follow my business, you'll know that I release Revit content on my store. So I've still got a lot of content to release. I think I'm up to content pack 9, and I think I've got about another 6 or 7 packs to release. And I'm keeping some of the best stuff for last. So there should be some good things coming. I try to release 1 per week, but sometimes I sort of miss a week or 2 just to really refine the content and make it the best quality that I can make it. And some of this content will be used in like my sample project for the training as well. So that'll show people how they can use my template, how they can use the content. And I'll probably release some free courses that sort of explain my template as well, because a lot of people bought the template and said, oh, I love it, but like I don't understand it. And there's some explanation views inside the model, but I think they still want that hands-on demonstration of how they can use it. That way people can follow the BIM guru standard. And I think YouTube, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with YouTube. What the goal is for the channel and how big I want to grow the channel to, because I don't monetize my channel, and I don't plan to. I just like to keep it free and available. And I've already checked, if I monetized, I'd make like probably $20 a month. So not worth it. Yeah. So I think I will keep releasing YouTube videos, but it might be like once a week or whenever I find something that I think is worth sharing, rather than just having to do 2 videos every week, rinse, repeat, because I find I get a bit burnt out if I do it that way. So that might become a change for the channel. It's grown to like almost 9,000 subscribers, and I never thought it would get that big. So there's obviously bigger channels out there, like, you know, you got Balkan Architect on 250 plus. But like, I know I'm not going to scale my primary platform as YouTube. So I'll keep focusing on it though. And I guess in the meantime, I'll keep consulting as well. So it's all going to keep me very busy, I guess. And I guess down the line, I'm still trying to decide on, you know, what BIM Guru will become. Like, will it become a business with more people involved, or will I maybe attach it to an organization or another consulting group? I'm not quite sure what the final destination is. I think the economy right now it's too hard to tell what I'm going to do with it. So I think eventually I'll probably have to go back to a bigger working environment down the line, just because I do miss that team dynamic that you get inside a company. But I love the freedom that you get from not being locked into a company as well. So I just had to find an environment where that can foster both of those ambitions. But maybe BIM Guru might grow. We might hire some employees down the line. Not yet, because the economy is just too weird right now to be able to hire people. But yeah, lots of options, and yeah, a lot going on too. So I might take a break eventually as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll be following your work as always, and I'm going to put all of your links on the description, your courses links, so everybody, if anybody's interested. So yeah, man. So I wish you the best. I think you are a great person, and you're doing a great job at YouTube. And I'm sure your videos are going to be great. Like, and I think you're different. You have a clarity in the things that you teach. You take good examples. Like I told you, like your examples. You think about the use of the Dynamo script. So I think that's a big difference for you. And yeah, so I wish you the best. And
thanks for having me on the show. And it's been great to just meet you as well, because I guess I've seen you on LinkedIn before and sort of wondered more about you. And it's good to meet you and sort of get your take on BIM and Dynamo, and just hear more about BIM in Brazil as well. That's been quite interesting, because I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone about BIM in Brazil. And I really appreciate you giving me just the time and the platform to talk to more people around the world as well. And if anyone else wants to reach out to me too, I always encourage people to reach out to me through either LinkedIn, which you'll find me by my current name, not that I'm changing it. And also if you email me at aussiebimguru@gmail.com, I usually respond to emails there in about a week typically, because I get a lot of emails. So I usually have to wait until the end of the week to respond to most of them. And of course, if there's any other podcasters out there and you think that there's something we can talk about, I'm more than happy to hear from you as well. And definitely encourage more people to come on your show, Paolo. Like, I really enjoyed this format. And I think that there's a lot you have to share with the industry as well. And I think it'll be great to see your own business efforts take off as well with the digital marketing for AEC.
Thank you, man.
I think that's a great business avenue, and I think it's going to be very successful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, so thank you. It was a great talk, and talk to you soon. Okay.
Yeah. Take care.
I'm going to do a very fast, I'm going to finish in Portuguese. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, no problems. Yeah.
That in Portuguese, okay. And then we can. I'm going to stop recording. Então, pessoal, foi isso. Muito obrigado por terem assistido. Esse foi o podcast e até próxima semana com mais um episódio aqui do meu podcast. Valeu!